Hey, welcome to another episode of the Overcome University podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today, we're joined by an incredibly inspiring guest, Vicki Goodman. After losing her husband to cancer in 2019, she had an unexpected trauma that went through in her life, and she's here to tell us about that story as his impact, where she had to go try to figure some things out through this adversity. She even decided to write a book about it, and now she's an inspiring author. Hey, Vicki, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here to tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure here to have you. Going through something like this, I can imagine it must have been a very, very tough time for you to even deal with and go through that. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what was it like for you to even go through the loss of losing your husband?
Sure. Well, we had 2 years from his diagnosis of liver cancer that had already spread at the time of diagnosis till Sam passed. And he did very well for most of that time. But I have to admit, I went through a lot of anxiety. I think as human beings, we fear the unknown and we fear uncertainty. And, leading up to his passing may have been the worst part, actually. Once it happened, I detected somehow a helping hand coming from somewhere outside myself to lead me and guide me into a more positive frame of mind and a more positive experience than I had
Mhm.
expected. I was flooded with optimism even on the day Sam passed, which was weird, but that's the way it happened. And that was the start of a much more um, a much more optimistic and positive way forward than I ever expected to have. So while I was grieving, some good things were also happening. And
Mhm.
after 2 years, I thought this story could help other people. And
Mhm.
that's when I decided to write the book.
Wow, 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 wow. I'm so glad you decided to write the book and tell us about your story and Sam's story too as well. So if you can share with us a little bit about what kind of person was Sam, so our audience could get to draw in a little bit closer to him, and tell us what can we expect from reading the book as well.
Oh, well, Sam was one of the best human beings I ever knew. I know we tend to say those things about people who have passed, but it really was true. In fact, I'm a pretty highly flawed persona. I'm a type A personality, impatient. And when compared to Sam, I often felt a little inferior.
Mhm.
He was such a good person. He believed above all else in doing the right thing in every situation, no matter what it cost him. And as far as I could see, in knowing him for 24 years and being married for 21 and a half of those years, uh, he never failed to do the right thing in all situations. He was very funny as well. So everybody loved Sam. He was just a terrific man. And in fact, I had a little bit of a problematic childhood, and it healed me to be
Mhm.
loved by a man like Sam. I respected him so much that I thought if he could love me, I felt better about myself from having had the love of that man. And after he passed, I still felt that. So it stayed with me after Sam's passing.
Wow, that's amazing. As soon as I brought the question up to you, I saw how your face just lit up in regards to as soon as you started talking about him. I
Yeah.
want to follow up on that. For someone to have that bit of empathy and that bit of resilience about themselves, I often believe that stems from somewhere. So if you can you share with us where did that come from? Was it from like your childhood or some things that you may have experienced, some things that you've dealt with, for you to even develop that empathy, and then for you to decide to even write about them? And then for you to even carry on his legacy now today.
Well, it's funny, Michael. I don't really consider myself to be all that empathic a person,
Mhm.
but I did recognize what I
Mhm.
had in Sam. And in fact, uh, in talking about the book, I've divided it into about three different sections, roughly. And the the beginning third is about Sam and a little about me and our life together. And the reason I did that was because, like you suggested earlier, I wanted the audience or the readers um, to know a little bit about us, so that when I get to the part in the middle of the book where Sam passes, they would understand the magnitude of that event, given
Hmm.
the kind of man he was. So that's why I spent the first third or so of the book describing him and our life together.
Wow. So let me ask you this. What was the most surprising part of like this grief journey for yourself? Like, how did your perspective on loss change?
There were so many things. But one thing that happened was I was offered meetings, I guess we'll say,
Hmm.
with the hospice chaplain from the hospice that we used about once a month for an entire year after Sam passed. And one of the things I asked her right off the bat was, tell me about the afterlife. I was raised in a very secular family, and
Hmm.
I had begun to believe in a higher power, but I hadn't taken that very far. Um, but suddenly, after Sam passed, I wanted to know if he was still around and where he was. So I was asking about the afterlife, and she recommended that I read the story of a secular neurosurgeon who had a brain infection, been in a coma for a week, and the description of his near-death experience was so impactful that it brought me the rest of the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife,
Hmm.
which seems incredible, but that's what happened. And so that was another aspect of what set me on this path to develop insights that completely upend the way we awfulize death and loss.
Mm.
And so that is a big part of this too. And that part's not even in the book because those insights came to me after I published the book. So those are in some audio episodes that I have on my website, and those are free too. So yeah, people can get to those easily. So yeah, that's what happened. It was just a series of serendipitous events, insights, opportunities coming my way that I felt motivated to embrace, to do
Hmm.
things that I had never done before and that weren't really on my radar before Sam passed. So this was sort of an inspired existence that I was living after losing the love of my life.
I want to ask you this, because just how you explained that in regards to like your circumstances, your belief, and your journey through that, I could imagine that some of our listeners could actually have been there once before or is currently in a similar situation. If you could share some of those insights, what are some tips and some advice from that insights that you could share with our audience that could be in similar situations?
Well, one of the things that really has to do with the theme of your podcast, Michael, is
Mhm.
that all adversity has a purpose. You know, we tend to get so upset when something bad happens, anything from a bad hair day to our house burning down or the loss of a loved one. But what I've learned is that there is a reason that these things happen to us. We are intended to learn lessons. And there is a lesson in every adversity. And so I say that when something bad happens, yeah, we're going to feel bad about it. But we also need to say, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? I don't want to miss God's intended takeaway. So that's one of the insights. Um, Another one is we tend to think in our culture that there's an ideal life, and what that ideal life is, at least in terms of relationships, is that we find one person fairly early in life, we get married, and we have an entire lifetime with that person into old age, at which point maybe we pass, not too far apart. I say that God has a plan for each one of us, and that's the plan for some people, but
Right.
that's not the plan for all of us. I
Mhm.
think his plan is more compartmentalized or segmented for others of us, and it doesn't mean that that plan is inferior. It just means that we were meant to experience life in chapters where maybe we're with different people in each of those chapters in relationship. Uh, and and maybe we're meant to do different things. We're meant to learn things. We're meant to experience things. And maybe we're even meant to teach others.
Wow, I love that perspective because so many times whenever we're going through adversities, we get stuck in that rut and we feel like we can't even get out of that. And then we'll find ourselves creating these different types of identities and titles and put them on ourselves. And it just keeps us there and keeps us stagnant. So I love your perspective in regards to what you're saying. I want to follow up and ask you something, which I think it's important for people to understand because you just spoke about one misconception. Are there any misconceptions that are out there that you have either experienced yourself or have came across from people just sharing stories with you from you pouring out into other people too as well when it comes to grief, and what were some of the challenges that you may have experienced in regards to like some of the misconceptions that's out there that you had to debunk for yourself or debunk for other people too as well?
I'm glad you asked that because, when you lose a loved one, a lot of people will say, um, just keep yourself as busy as possible so
Mhm.
you don't have time to think or feel. I instinctively knew that, however well intended that advice, I knew it was bad advice. Because you have to process what's happened to your life. You know, Even if we don't awfulize death anymore because we realize that's a cultural construct,
Mhm.
and that it's all a part of God's plan, and
Mhm.
that we will join our loved one in the afterlife later. So there's really nothing terrible or tragic about death, but we do have to process the fact that the person who we shared our home with isn't there physically with us anymore. There are big changes to our lives, and that's where I think the grief needs to be placed. And so, what I did was I created a balance between activities and quiet time. The activities being lunch with a friend, or in my case, orchestra rehearsals. I started going to karaoke at the suggestion of some friends, and it turned out I could sing. Who knew? I know it's great. So activities, quiet time, sitting quietly, or reading a book, or taking a hike or a walk. Whatever you need to do to allow you the time to process what's happened to your life so you can get through it as completely and, I guess, quickly as possible. Not that you're going to maybe get over all of the grief that way, but at least you can move on into a happier place more quickly. You need to process what's happened.
I love that because as I've spoken to quite a few different people, and like we just talked about, and as you've shared, is they don't know how to get out of that. But I thought it was interesting for you to share that because the normal for most people is I'm sleeping next to this person for 20 years. Our routine is what it is. Now all of a sudden I don't wake up next to this person. I don't say goodnight to this person. We're not traveling together, going to the grocery stores. We're not going to events. We're not seeing our grandkids and all of these different things. And the routine changes. and it leaves us a little bit discombobulated. Now we have to work on a new way of striking a balance. And you shared where you had to like get out and start doing different things, learn that you could start singing now and do, you know what I mean? So I love that aspect in regards to not staying there and just moving forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I realized that you did not just write one book, you wrote another book, because now you're on this path of starting to tell stories, and you're starting to develop into your authorship. Can you tell us a little bit about this other book you have called Speed Bump?
Yeah, I just finished Speed Bumps this morning. I literally just finished it an hour ago, and I've been working on it for a long time. And because of the podcast interviews and everything else with, the book, I hadn't been able to get back to it for months and months and months, probably over a year. But a couple of weeks ago, I said, this is it. I'm saying no to everything else. I'm going to finish this book. And so I finished it an hour ago. And I had such fun with it. It is so self-deprecating because of my personality flaws, namely that I'm a type A personality, impatient, and everything else, that driven, and all those traits that can be positive in some ways, but not in all ways. And the things that Sam's being such a terrific person kind of highlighted. So it's about the trials of life, especially from the point of view of a type A personality. And aside from it being really fun to have written it, because I like making fun of myself, I thought it could be a book that other type A's, who are probably also pretty down on themselves for the way they are, could relate to, could identify with. But also I thought type B's, many of them have type A's in their lives, and they don't know what to make of this drive and these compulsions and the impatience. And so I thought the book could help the type B's too to understand their type A's better. So it's called Speed Bumps and Other Impediments to Life in the Fast Lane. And my favorite chapter, although I don't know, I like a lot of them, but I guess my favorite chapter title is Road Rage 101.
I want to ask you this, because I've noticed what you just mentioned. Like, you're on your second book now, and you decided to step out of your comfort zone and do some other things and challenge yourself and push yourself, especially as a type A type of person. What are some things that you've seen work for yourself in regards to like dealing with a loss or dealing with the grief? And we always often talk about people struggle with coping and dealing with that. So what are some recommendations? What are some advice that you could share based off some of the things that you've done that you would share with our audience in regards to getting out there and doing some different things that they could use that to actually like strike a new balance for themselves?
I think a lot of people who suffer a loss feel guilty about moving on too soon. This is another sort of thing that I would call a cultural construct. Our culture tells us we have to grieve for a certain amount of time. And that might be a little different for different people, but it's still something that is a have to. So here you are, having lost someone. In my case, it was the love of my life. And you feel all this pressure to do things a particular way. I say, if you are flooded with optimism the day your loved one passes, like I was, I thought it was unseemly. But now looking back on it, it was exactly right in my case. So what I say is, open yourself up to guidance. Because if it was available to me from somewhere outside myself, then it has to be available to others. And if opportunities start coming your way and you think, oh, too soon, again, the guilt and the expectation of a particular way to grieve, embrace those opportunities if you want to. Why not? You can grieve and have some good experiences while you're doing so. One of the other insights that came to me was that we don't have to feel any guilt or any negative thoughts about what our loved one in the afterlife is thinking about the things we do.
Mm,
All they want is for us to be the happiest and to move on in the easiest and most productive way possible. And the reason I know that is because the neurosurgeon who I read about talks about the afterlife having a love. Souls in the afterlife are surrounded by a love so powerful we can't possibly even fathom
mhm,
what it's like here on earth.
mhm.
And so, if that's the case, then there aren't any negative emotions. Those all died with the brain and the
Right,
body.
right, right.
Souls are pure. They are surrounded by this unbelievable love, and they don't experience negative emotions like anger or jealousy. They just want us to be happy.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's very important to point out. So, as you were dealing with that, it sounded like some books helped you, but it also sounded like you had some other things into your life. And I'm saying that in regards to like, did you have like some friends? Did you have some coworkers? Did you have some family members? Did you have some new people to you just come into your life and just like kind of pick you up and said, no, we're not going to let you stay here? So can you talk about some people that was instrumental in your life as you was dealing with this transition for yourself?
You know, I'm kind of a very self-sufficient survivor type.
Okay.
So, even on the day Sam passed, I didn't think about calling anyone. I've got lots of friends.
Hmm.
I did not think about calling anyone. I
Hmm.
just wanted to be alone with what had happened.
Hmm.
That is not the usual case.
Hmm.
However, soon after that, I did have some friends who called to get together. Um, I had some friends who were really just mere acquaintances at the time.
Hmm.
And they didn't have to do anything for me because we weren't that close. But they called, not only were they the ones that suggested I go to karaoke, but they had me over every Tuesday night for pizza night, every Tuesday night for an entire year. And boy, I I appreciated that so much. It
Hmm.
gave me something to look forward to each and every week. And then once COVID came about, just about 7 months after Sam passed, I really needed those
Hmm.
gatherings
Hmm.
because my balance between the activities and the quiet time was really upset
Hmm.
with, so many things having been shut down, so many activities not being available to us. And suddenly I was spending a little too much time alone. So yeah, people like that really, really helped me out. And not only that, but when they suggested I go to karaoke, that was a whole new group of people that I didn't know that are now wonderful friends. And so that's why I suggest being open to new things because you'll meet new people and it will set you in. It will make it easier for you to transition into this new chapter of life that's waiting for you. And you
I
can
love
make it
that.
anything you want it to be.
I love that. That's exactly why I was asking you that, because it was 2019 and I know it was going right into COVID-19 that kind of like shut us down. And I could just only imagine going through something like that and just having people around you supporting you to help you get through that transition.
Well, I'm really glad Sam didn't pass during COVID because I'm sure you all heard the horror stories of how people couldn't get into uh, well, not only hospitals, but places where, like assisted living homes and
Mhm.
places where hospices, family members couldn't go into these places during that time.
Exactly.
I am really happy if this had to happen that Sam passed before all that.
Exactly, exactly. So as we get ready to close up here, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you have coming up in the future, some of the things that you're passionate about, and what can we expect from you coming up in regards to either more books, more karaoke? What we got coming up for you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, I play in an orchestra. I've been playing violin since age 7. I play in a pops orchestra here in the mountains of Arizona in our small town. It's really fun. I do sing in public now sometimes. We have a yearly event here in town, and I sing there with a friend. Um, as far as writing, I don't know that I have any other books planned, but I was just thinking yesterday, knowing Speed Bumps was just about done, I was
Mhm,
thinking I might like to write a play. Not that I
mhm.
really know how, but I didn't know how to write a book either. And it came out they've both come out very well. And have, To Sam with Love, my first book, is really getting such great feedback. I'm really thrilled about it. So I don't really know what's next, maybe some travel. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm just enjoying retirement. I don't feel retired, but at least I'm doing a job that I love.
Nothing wrong with that, living in your purpose. Before we get out of here, what are some key takeaways from your life, from your story, that you want our audience to take away that you've shared from here today?
Yeah, I think we've talked about all of them, Michael. Create that balance if you lose someone between activity and quiet time. Uh, Heed these 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 insights that kind of undo the cultural conditioning that
Hmm.
causes us to make death such a tragic event. I don't believe it is.
Hmm.
Um, and embrace that next chapter of life without guilt. There's no reason for guilt. So, those are the main things. And I would encourage people to go to um, my site, inspiredgrief.com, and get subscribe to those 3 audio episodes I mentioned earlier. They go into a lot more detail. They're not long. They're about 12 to 15 minutes each. There are 3 of them. So all 3 are about 45 minutes long total. And they go into a lot more detail about these insights we touched on today. And I think they're very helpful. So do that. And you can also buy the book there, discounted, To Sam with Love, A Surviving Spouse's Story of Inspired Grief. And there's also a link on that landing page to some blog articles as well. So, it's all good. Please
Well,
go.
awesome. Thank you for that. One last thing, if people wanted to get you on their podcast or have you come and speak or anything like that, is there another website or email or social media that they could find you to as well?
Yeah, at VickiParisGoodman.com. There is a contact form, and it's very easy to just fill it out, and I will get an email with whatever information is there, and I'd be happy to respond.
Absolutely. Well, Vicky, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Overcoming Adversity podcast to have this conversation with me today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it very much.
Me too. Until next time, guys, God bless.
Ain't at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.